Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, April 29th. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. We have a lot to get into today. Of course, we're going to finish up our NFL draft coverage, at least for a little while, with a draft grade for each and every NFL team. We'll start off with the A's, get to the B's, and finally the bottom tier, which is the C's. We went over winners and losers yesterday, but we'll dive into a little bit of how I got to my process with each of these draft grades. Then we'll dive into a little bit of what's going on in the playoffs in each sport, where Giannis might end up after more and more issues seem to be piling up in Milwaukee. We'll talk about that situation for him and for Dame a little bit. That's all coming up later. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, April 29th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into everything going on in the NFL draft. We'll start off with the A's. Like I promised, there were a whole lot of teams that I thought had a really good draft. That is 13 out of 32 teams that I gave at least an A- to, and we'll start all the way at the top. There were 4 teams I gave A+ to, that being the Dallas Cowboys, the New York Giants, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Cleveland Browns. I like all 4 of these drafts when you look at them for the players that they got. We'll start off with the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, the big shining moment with them is the fact they got 3 guys that could have or maybe even should have gone in the first round. In offensive guard Tyler Booker, edge rusher Donovan Ezeraku out of Boston College, and cornerback Siobhan Ravel Jr., who I am a huge fan of. But that wasn't it. They also got a lot of solid depth pieces, guys that could potentially step in and be immediate starters. Looking at in round 5, Jadon Blue, the running back out of Texas, and the linebacker Shamar James, who could step in at a role that they kind of really needed badly last season. Jadon Blue is a guy that I expect to take over that backfield in Dallas at some point. As much as I like Javonte Williams, he has proven that ever since his injury in his rookie year, he hasn't quite been the same back, and I've never really been that big of a Miles Sanders fan. But Jadon Blue is someone that I think with his speed and quickness, his ability for that home run speed, is someone that I really do think can change the Cowboys' backfield for the better. That was an A+ draft for the Cowboys. They were my favorite draft of the night. My second favorite draft of the night, though, that goes to the New York Giants. And sure, you can call me biased here. The only reason they're not number 1 is because they drafted Jackson Dart, and that might be the worst pick in the entire draft, not just the first round, but the entire draft. Jackson Dart is not a guy that I personally have a real grade on. Definitely not first round. Was looking more in that 3rd to 4th kind of round for Jackson Dart. Instead, they trade up for Jackson Dart. Not really the best use of resources, although the good thing is they didn't have to give up too much. But they support that awful pick with one of the best draft classes I have ever seen. They obviously draft the home run pick of Abdul Carter in round 1, pick 3. That one was a slam dunk, and glad they didn't mess that up. Then in round 3, they turn around and get Darius Alexander, who I personally had a first-round grade on. I love Darius Alexander, his physicality out of Toledo. That is someone that I think is going to come out and just be an absolute wrecking force for the Giants on a new, maybe the best defensive line in all of football. Now with Alexander, Carter, Lawrence, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, they've got depth, they've got power, they've got the guys on the interior. What more could you want? I'll tell you what more, a running back that was 5th in Heisman voting that falls to the 4th round in Cam Skattebo. Cam Skattebo, who people are talking all about contact balance with Ashton Genty. He's got that if you like contact balance. Now, of course, different styles of runner, but I love what Cam Skattebo can bring. You've got that lightning thunder duo with him and Tyrone Tracy now. That's going to be a really fun backfield in New York, at least for the next couple of years. And they finish that off with another great pick, a guy in Marcus Mbao that a lot of people out of Purdue, an offensive lineman that can play basically any position. The Giants need that bad. They need offensive line, but a lot of people are saying that he could have gone in the early second round. Instead, he falls to the fifth, value pick after value pick after value pick after Jackson Dart. That's the only reason this isn't the number one class on my board, but I love what the Giants did. They get an A+ for me. Similarly, the Seahawks also get an A+. They brought in Gray Zabel in the first round. That one is just exactly what they needed. Then they take a risk, in my opinion, a risk on Nick Imanwari, the safety out of South Carolina. He is going to be either the best safety or the worst safety. There's really no in between with him. This is a pretty weak safety class overall, but then they got a tight end, Elijah Arroyo out of Miami. Jalen Milroe is a guy that I love coming out of Alabama. He's a guy that has all of the upside in the world if he develops correctly, especially with a not-so-committal contract that we're giving to a guy like Sam Darnold in Seattle. I love what the Seahawks bring over here with Jalen Milroe. Torrey Horton as a wide receiver, I love him. He's one of those underrated wide receivers for me. And two really good seventh-round picks, really good value picks. In running back Damian Martinez and wide receiver Ricky White III. Both of these guys, I think, are going to come in and be able to be producers on day one if they get their opportunity, get their shine. Ricky White more on that special team side, but he is elusive if he gets the ball in his hands. Look for him to maybe do some punt return and kick return for the Seattle Seahawks this year. I love this draft class for the Seahawks a lot. And the final A+ that I gave out goes to the Cleveland Browns. I might have misclassified them yesterday. I was looking at the picks a little bit more, and I actually love what the Browns did. I don't love the fact that they traded away from a all-world, all-generational talent, a special kind of talent we've never seen before in the NFL in Travis Hunter, but they did a good job with it. They got an extra first-round pick. They pick up Mason Graham, who is the second-best defender in this class, maybe even the first. He's probably got a little bit of a higher floor than Abdul Carter does, but a lower ceiling. Carson Schwezinger out of UCLA, the linebacker, is excellent in coverage. I love what he brings in the second round, as well as Quinshon Judkins, one of the two-headed monsters from Ohio State at running back. They bring in Dylan Sampson in the fourth round. You've, again, got a Lightning Thunder duo there. You build around that, move off of Jerome Ford, who really wasn't cutting it as RB1 for them last season, bringing a really interesting receiving threat at tight end in Harold Fannin Jr., put him opposite of Njoku, and you look at what those two can do in a 12 personnel set. That is going to be really, really fun to watch in the third round. And then, of course, the quarterbacks. Obviously, the big controversy is the fact that they drafted two in Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. But neither of them are really a surefire thing, right? You get one in the third and one in the fifth. If you get either of those guys to hit as your future franchise quarterback, you have run this draft out of the water. I love what the Browns did. All four of those teams get A+ from me. There's two teams that just get normal A's, the Eagles and the Dolphins. The Eagles, they just hit everything, right? Jahad Campbell, Andrew Makuba, two of my highest rated players at their positions. Ty Robinson is exactly the hole they needed to fill. Kyle McCord is a solid backup, but they didn't do anything that really blew me out of the water. They were smart. They waited their turn. They let the draft come to them, and they filled a lot of holes that they needed to. Same thing can be said for the Miami Dolphins. I also gave them an A. In round one, they took Kenneth Grant at pick 13. That was a pick that a lot of people were expecting them to go corner, which is my big gripe in this draft. They waited until the fifth round to address the corner position. Outside of that, I really like what they've done. At defensive tackle, rebuilding that defensive line after moving off of a bunch of guys. Kenneth Grant out of Michigan, I love. Jordan Phillips in the third round. You address the offensive line in the second with Jonas Savaiana. That is out of Arizona. I absolutely love that pick for them as a big guard down there who could move a little bit. They addressed the secondary in the fifth round. I would have liked to see them address it sooner with cornerback Jason Marshall Jr. and safety Dante Trader Jr. These are guys that I don't really believe too much in, but at least they got their pick for it, and they should be able to make a little bit of impact for this team right away. Ollie Gordon in the sixth is a value pick if I've ever seen one. They move off of one of their running backs after, Devon Achane takes over that backfield. They really struggled in short yardage situations last season. Getting a guy like Ollie Gordon that can be that power rusher to the speed that is Achane, Ollie Gordon is a perfect pick for them in the 6th round. I love what they did. And then they pick up a backup for Tua, something that has probably been their biggest weakness. They get a backup for him in the 7th round in Quinn Ewers as well. The Steelers, my final solid A that I gave out, they go Derek Harmon in the 1st round, addressing that defensive tackle position that they need after losing Larry Ogunjobi. Caleb Johnson in the 3rd round. They didn't have a 2nd round pick, but he's a running back that I think can completely change things after moving off of Najee Harris this offseason. They get a couple other guys from the national championship team. Jack Sawyer, the linebacker, who was the captain of the defense's leadership over there, should be pretty huge. Getting him in the 4th round, I think, is really good value. And then Will Howard. Will Howard is going to be potentially QB1, depending on what's going on with Aaron Rodgers, but he steps into an opportunity where he could show what he can do. And if Will Howard gets behind a solid offensive line, he has the weapons with DK and Pickens. This is a guy that I think could be pretty successful in Pittsburgh. Getting him in the 6th round, I don't hate that at all. I really don't. Moving on to the A minuses, there's quite a few teams here that I gave A minuses to. We'll start off with the Atlanta Falcons. I kind of clowned them a little bit for the trade they made in the 1st round, but you look at the rest of their selections, they didn't have too many picks, but they hit on just about all of them. That I really liked all of them. Jalen Walker's a guy that I like. He can be really effective as an edge rusher or a linebacker. James Pierce Jr. was really effective at Tennessee. He got much better in the run game. You trade up, you give a lot to get him, but you have a new set of edges for the Falcons, which is exactly what they've been missing. And then they bring in Xavier Watts, who's one of my favorite safeties in this entire draft in round 3. He's maybe the complete package at safety that we don't see in a lot of other guys. I love Xavier Watts. I love this pick for the Falcons. They're here at A-. The only reason I didn't bump them up higher is because I thought they gave up just a little bit too much in that James Pierce Jr. trade. The Panthers similarly get an A-. I liked their first 3 picks a lot, bringing in Tet McMillan, Nick Scourton, 2 first-round guys, Princely Umalian, an edge rusher over there to address that defensive need, and then they went offense for a little bit. They took a flyer on Jimmy Horn Jr., a wide receiver that I think could be really explosive in the league this year, and Trevor Etienne. He gets his chance. Obviously, his brother Travis Etienne on the Jaguars. It's still a crowded backfield over there for the Panthers, but getting a guy like Etienne in the 4th round, again, I like the value there for them. The Jags make this list because of the trade up for Travis Hunter. I don't think they did anything else too special, but I love them being aggressive and getting Travis Hunter. I also like the 7th round pick of LaQuint Allen out of Syracuse, the running back. I love what they're able to do there. They address the offensive line with Wyatt Millam out of West Virginia in round 3, address the defense a little bit with Caleb Ransaw out of Tulane in the 3rd round, and Jack Kaiser, a linebacker, in the 4th round. I love what the Jaguars did this draft, especially around Travis Hunter. He's one of my favorite players, one of my favorite prospects ever that I've seen when we're looking at the draft. And the final couple of teams that got A- is the Chiefs. Justin Simmons. Need I say more? He's arguably the best offensive tackle in this class. He falls to 32. They get picks to draft him. They also grab Omar Norman Lott out of Tennessee, the defensive tackle, to pair him up with Chris Jones on the inside. Take a flyer on Jalen Royals. I really like what the Chiefs did in this draft. The Patriots similarly hit on just about everything. Will Campbell's going to be a home run pick. Travion Henderson is going to be an amazing pass blocker as well as pass catcher and running back. Kyle Williams is a guy that a lot of people are high on out of Washington, the wide receiver. I'm not super high on him, but he is someone that if he hits the way that some people are saying, Kyle Williams could be the next big wide receiver for the Patriots. Jared Wilson at center, continuing to rebuild that offensive line with Will Campbell. And then they got a couple of edge rushers in the late rounds, a couple of defenders in the late round. A guy that I like is Braden Swinson out of LSU. This is a guy that I think could be really impactful for the Patriots this season. And finally, the Titans. They get an A- simply because they get Cam Ward. There's a couple of other picks that I really like as well. They get Gunnar Helm, the tight end out of Texas, in round 4. I think he's a really solid tight end. They get wide receiver Eric Iominer out of Stanford. He's a guy that was fringe first round for a lot of people when we're looking at these mock draft websites. A wide receiver 6-ish kind of ranking. Not that high for me, but a lot of people liked him. In round 4 is a good spot. They get Khalil Mullings, who was the entire offense from Michigan in round 6, and they grab a safety in round 3 and Kevin Winston Jr. to address that defense. I love what the Titans did. I really did. They get an A- for me. That's 13 teams that knock this draft out of the water. 13 teams that get an A, 4 that get an A+. I'm a huge fan of a lot of these drafts this year. There are a whole lot more that were kind of mid in the middle with those B to B- grades. We'll talk about those coming up next, but let me know what your thoughts are. What drafts would you give an A+ to? Which drafts would you give just a normal A to? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we discuss the B rankings. There are about 20 teams in B for me. We'll run through and make sure we don't spend too much time on each and every one, but we'll take a look at each team's draft class, what the strengths and weaknesses were coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, April 29th, if you were just tuning in. We just went over my draft grades. 13 teams got an A-, A, or an A+. 4 teams in specific getting A+. We went over those teams that I would consider winners in this draft. In this segment, we turn our attention to the teams continuing our draft grades that I gave in the B range. B+, B, B-. That's coming up in a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, April 29th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into all of those letter B grades that we gave out in the NFL draft. We're going to start off as we did with the B pluses. There's only a couple teams that I gave a B+ to. A lot more were sitting in that B range. There's still a solid number that got B+ though. We're going to start off with the Cardinals. The reason they're not in that A range, despite getting two guys that are mocked almost 100% in the first round in defensive tackle Walter Nolan and cornerback Will Johnson, is because that's about it for this class. There's nothing else that really sticks out to me as a great value pick. They got a couple guys out of Ohio State, some defenders over there, but I really like these first two picks, and them alone in round 1 and 2 are enough for me to give them a B+ grade. I would have liked to see more for them to raise up to that A level, but overall, this is a Cardinals team that I think did a really good job in this draft. Another team that kind of fills in that same kind of role, getting 2 first-round talents and maybe a couple of other pieces, is the Baltimore Ravens. Those bird teams, of course, stay in near the top. The Ravens get Malachi Starks, one of my favorite safeties in this draft. Pair him up with Kyle Hamilton. They're going to be a very deadly duo over there. Edge rusher Mike Green, who falls to them in the second round due to some potential legal issues outside of football. But when he's on the field, he's either the second or third best edge rusher in this class pretty solidly. They address the offensive and defensive line, which absolutely they needed to do, and Emory Jones Jr. on the 3rd round. And in the 6th round, a pick I really like, Aeneas Peebles out of Virginia Tech on that defensive tackle. On the defensive line, I love what he does. He's going to be that Michael Pierce replacement. That's going to be huge for them. This is a defense that needs to play better. I would have liked to see them address the secondary a little bit more. They didn't do that until later on in the draft, which a little bit disappointing. But either way, this is a Ravens team that I thought hit when the picks were there. They let the guys come to them. Again, Malachi Starks came to them. Mike Green came to them. I thought they had a really solid draft, so they get a B+. The Bears also get a B+. There's a couple players that I really like with them. Colston Loveland, the tight end, is going to help them. Again, we're seeing a lot more teams try to get to that 12 personnel, especially with Ben Johnson loving to run the ball. You get 2 tight ends, 2 receiving threat tight ends with Colston Loveland and Cole Kmet over there. Those 2 guys that can come in and be just a problem, a mismatch for defenses, for corners, for linebackers, however you want to put it. You get him in round 1 at pick 10. I love that pick for the Bears. Round 2, you grab Luther Burden. Luther Burden, who's going to just be a monster in Chicago. He's going to be able to do a lot of the stuff that they were doing with Keenan Allen last year, those bubble screens. That's kind of thing that they should have been using a smaller, faster receiver than Keenan Allen. Instead, they used Keenan Allen. Maybe we'll see Luther Burden or DJ Moore in that role a little bit more this season. That's the kind of thing that I'm looking for when we're seeing this wide receiver get picked in the 2nd round. Ozzie Chapalo out of Boston College to address that final offensive tackle need. He's someone that can come in, add depth for them. I love that pick in round 2. Also in round 2, their 2nd round pick, they get Shamar Turner to help out that defensive line, continue to build on what was a really solid defense, especially early on in the season when they were still winning games. I think the defense just kind of gave up a little bit down the stretch of the season. They'll be back. They'll be really good. I love the Shamar Turner pick. And the last one that I wanted to pay attention to with the Bears was Kyle Monangai out of Rutgers. I think he's a really interesting back for them to take. We saw them do that kind of David Montgomery role in the Lions with Ben Johnson. I think Kyle Monangai can kind of play that with DeAndre Swift playing the Jahmyr Gibbs role. You get those 2 guys. I'm really curious how it's going to go. I love this Bears draft. They get a B+. The Raiders similarly get a B+. They're here because they knocked it out of the park with Ashton Jeanty. I love Ashton Jeanty. He's going to come in and immediately make a difference. But outside of that, there wasn't really anything that leapt off the page for me in this draft. I'm not a huge fan of Jack Beck. He's someone that I think can come in and maybe as a wide receiver 2 or 3 make a difference. They addressed the offensive line in the 3rd round, which I'm really glad they did. They needed that badly, getting Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant for a guard and a tackle. And then shout out Tonka Hemingway, one of the all-name people in this draft. Going in the 4th round, he's a big guy at defensive tackle that's just going to eat up blocks, eat up running backs when they go up the middle. I love this pick. They're going to continue to build around a really solid, stingy defense already. I like the Raiders, a B+ for them. The Chargers also get a B+. I wasn't a huge fan of all their picks, but I do see the vision here, right? You see them really going hard into that hard-nosed Jim Harbaugh run the ball down your throat system. Omarion Hampton as a running back in round 1. You pair him up with Najee Harris. They did a exclusive rights free agent tender on J.K. Dobbins, so if nobody signs him, they can re-sign him and have exclusive negotiating rights. Omarion Hampton, that is a 3-headed monster, 3 power backs right there. They also bring in another 2nd-round wide receiver, this time Trey Harris out of Ole Miss. Trey Harris is a guy that has a little bit of injury concerns, which isn't great when they don't really have anybody else. But you pair him up with Ladd McConkey, pair him up with the other weapons over there, they could potentially be something. Going back to the defense, they get edge Kyle Kennard in the 4th round. I love that. He's going to be exactly what they need. Add more pressure to the quarterback after moving off of Joey Bosa. And then the guy that I think is going to go really underrated, Oronde Gadsden II, the tight end out of Syracuse. I love that pick for the Chargers. You want to talk about getting your quarterback weapons? Will Dissly was a huge part of the offense in that tight end role. Gadsden is a guy that can block. He's a guy that has really good hands. He's someone that I cannot wait to see in a Chargers uniform. That is a perfect fit for him. I'm really excited to see what he brings this season. And then they finish it off with a safety that I'm a fan of in R.J. Mickens in the 6th round out of Clemson. He's not the full complete package, but you let him sit behind Derwin James for a little bit. He hits hard. I like R.J. Mickens. He's someone that I think could come in and make a little bit of a difference as depth for them. The Jets and the 49ers are the last two teams to get B pluses for me. Armand Membu, Mason Taylor, Azure Thompson, all three in 1, 2, 3 for the Jets, I thought were really good picks. These are guys that I've seen mocked in the first round. Other than Membu, there weren't really guys that I mocked in the first round, but they needed a tackle bad. They needed a tight end. They needed corner after losing DJ Reed. They hit all their needs. I really like what they did. I also like Malachi Moore in the 4th round out of Alabama, the safety. This was just a draft that they kind of hit their needs, and they were like, this is what we're going to deal with. We're going to take the best player available at our biggest need at every single opportunity. They did that. It's a solid draft. It's a solid draft strategy. We'll see if it pays off for New York this year. They get a B+. The final B+, though, goes to the 49ers. They get Mykel Williams. Some people say it's a reach. I like him out of Georgia. Alfred Collins as well, the defensive tackle, is someone I really like. Then they address the corner room. I would love to see them address the corner room a little bit earlier. Upton Stout is not my favorite corner in this draft, but with round 3 when they were picking, he was probably best available. CJ West out of Indiana and Curtis Rourke are really interesting picks. I love CJ West to play defensive tackle for them, even in just a reserve role when you need to let some other guy rest. He's a guy that's going to get to the quarterback. He's been really solid. And Curtis Rourke, we're going to talk a little bit potentially about the 49ers and what's going on with contract negotiations with Brock Purdy. Getting a guy like Curtis Rourke that was playing injured all season long and still led this Indiana team to the college football playoffs, that's a really good sign. He's a little bit older. I like Curtis Rourke, though, in round 7 for the 49ers. Getting to the teams that just got normal Bs, just the average Bs. The Bills, I thought their picks were fine. None of their picks were really bad, but they weren't the guys that I would have taken or my favorite looks. Maxwell Harrison out of Kentucky, solid corner in round 1, wasn't my favorite corner on the board. Defensive tackle TJ Sanders, same thing. Solid defensive tackle, wasn't my favorite defensive tackle on the board. Same thing with Landon Jackson in round 3 out of Arkansas. Solid player, not my favorite one on the board. Same thing with Deontay Walker. I think all of these picks are going to turn into solid players, but I think there were better options on the board for the Bills at a lot of these picks, and I think because of that, they're just sitting at an average B for the Buffalo Bills. The Colts, similarly there. Tyler Warren in the first round was kind of the worst kept secret around the league. That was going to happen. They bring in edge JT Tiumalu out of Ohio State, running back DJ Giddens. I like that pick a lot. And then they bring in Riley Leonard, who I don't expect to really make a difference with the quarterback battle between Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson, but still getting a guy like him that's been there, done that in a lot of different situations, been successful, led his team all the way to the championship game. I like that pick for them. The Colts just get an average B. Same thing with the Saints. Kelvin Banks Jr., a fine pick. Tyler Shuck, a solid pick. Jonas Sanker, probably better available there at safety, but still a solid pick. And Devin Neal, a guy that is kind of up in the air at running back, but if you get him on that field, if he gets open in space and can use the blocks, he's going to be really dangerous for the Saints. A solid B for them. And the last team that I just gave a B was the Washington Commanders. The Washington Commanders, to me, didn't need too much, but they addressed each and every one of their needs. At the first round, they finished building that offensive line with tackle Josh Connerly Jr. You need to protect your quarterback. Then they get a corner. They needed a corner in the worst possible way. They needed a corner. They go out, they get their corner in Trey Amos, someone that fell to them in the second round. Then Jalen Lane. They get him a speedy wide receiver. I love that pick. Stayed local in Virginia in round 4. I think the Commanders kind of knocked it out of the park. There's a couple more teams in the B, a couple more teams that got B minuses. 3 of them. We'll start off with the Bengals, who got Shamar Stewart and Demetrius Knight Jr. in round 1 and 2, addressed the defense, turned over to the offensive line. I like what they did there as well. But this is just nothing that really screams super special to me. There's a couple potential reaches in their picks. I like Shamar Stewart, but he wasn't super productive at A&M. Same with Demetrius Knight at South Carolina. So they get a B-. The Rams get a B- simply off the strength of the trade that they made. They get a future first-round pick. I would have liked to see them address some positions of need. Maybe take a quarterback later on in the draft. Instead, they get Terrence Ferguson at tight end, what they needed, and Chris Paul Jr. in the 5th round, I think is sneaky good value for him. He's someone that I think could come out and play pretty good football as well. And the final one in the B category, That's the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings, B-. They get Donovan Jackson, a bit of a reach in the first round. Grab Ty Felton in the third, who I do like as a third wide receiver. And defensive tackle Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins out of Georgia to help bolster that defensive line, which was a big weakness for them. They needed that. They also go out and extend Van Ginkel this afternoon. Big fan of that extension. 1 year, $23 million for him. This is a Vikings draft that's not the best, not the worst. They didn't have too many huge needs. I think they addressed everything they possibly could have in this draft. Big fan of what they did. But those are all the Bs. There's still a couple more teams left to go here in our draft. There's 5 teams that I thought kind of had not the best draft possible. We'll talk about those teams that I gave a C2, finishing up our draft grades here, coming up next, here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, April 29th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the A's and B's, the winners, and the teams that just kind of did their thing in the draft in the 2025 NFL Draft. In this segment, we turn our attention to the big losers. There are 5 teams that I gave a C grade, no lower than a just normal C. There were no C minuses given out. We'll talk about those teams, why I thought they didn't have a great draft class, and much more coming up in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, April 29th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our final part of the NFL draft grades here. Draft heavy show for you. We're talking about the teams that I thought had the worst drafts. We'll start off with the C pluses. There are 4 teams that I gave a C plus to. Only one team I gave a C2 in this draft. We'll start off with those C pluses. The Denver Broncos, top of my list. I really like that Jahdae Barron pick. I think he makes the best cornerback room now in the NFL with him and reigning defensive player of the year on the other side for the Broncos over there in Pat Surtain II. They also bring in a lot of help in overall with Talise Hufanga and a bunch of other players on the defensive side of the ball for the Broncos that is going to help this defense get even better than it was last season. Insane. But outside of that pick, I don't know what they were doing. There were a lot of great running backs on the board for them in round 2. They take R.J. Harvey, not my favorite running back, not a guy that I really project to be that great, and another guy that I think is just going to be part of that cog in the running back wheel that is the Broncos backfield right now. Same thing in round 3. They get wide receiver Pat Bryant out of Illinois. Not my favorite wide receiver. There's other guys left at that point in the draft. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me when they were picking these guys and why they were picking these guys. Maybe I'll be dead wrong on these people. But it felt like a huge reach for the Broncos to take. The Broncos should still be good next season, especially with the defense they have, but they kind of half addressed their needs more than anything else. And because of that, I'm giving them a C+. The Lions also find themselves in a very similar situation. They get a C+. I thought they reached a little bit on Tyleik Williams, a defensive tackle. He's someone that I thought would have fallen to the second round. He's still going to be solid, but I thought he'd be there in round 2. Out of Ohio State, I would have loved to see them take an edge rusher. They didn't go out and do that until way later on in the draft. I like the Tate Rutledge pick, the offensive guard out of Georgia. He's going to be big, strong, and physical exactly in that Dan Campbell Lions attitude and that Lions kind of culture there. I think he's going to fit really good for them. And Isaac Tesla. These guys, I think, are just not the greatest pick, right? Again, I thought they reached for him. They traded up to get him. They moved a bunch of picks to get him in round 3. So they see something they really like. But this one doesn't feel the same as when they really fell in love with Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs, everyone knew was going to be a good player. He was someone that was mocked near the end of first round, early round 2. Isaac Tesla, not a guy really feeling that same kind of love that Jahmyr Gibbs was feeling at that time. Maybe I'll be dead wrong about him, but because of that, they get a C+. The Packers also get a C+. I'm not sure exactly what their plan was. They needed an edge rusher. They didn't really address that. There wasn't really a true wide receiver one. This feels like a weird time for them to say we're going to break our curse of never picking a wide receiver in the first round. In fact, 2 of their first 3 picks were wide receivers. And Matthew Golden, a guy that I think can step up and be really good for them. I like that pick. And Savion Williams out of TCU, a guy that reminds me of Kadarius Toney a lot with his speed and ability with the ball in his hands, but he doesn't have the greatest hands. He bobbles the ball a lot. He likes to run before he has the ball in his hands. He doesn't look the ball in. He drops the ball way too much. In round 3, that seems a lot, and they didn't address corner until round 7 when they took Micah Robinson. They're letting go of Jair Alexander, most likely. They can't find a trade partner for him right now, but they just didn't address their needs, and they have too many wide receivers on the same tier as Savion Williams. I just don't really like that pick for the Packers. Maybe they see something there, but they needed a real dog in that room, and I don't think they really got that. As much as I like Matthew Golden, this was not my favorite Packers draft. Another team that gets a C+, the Buccaneers. I like the players the Buccaneers team took, especially the corners in round 2 and 3 in Benjamin Morrison and Jacob Parrish. I love Emeka Egbuka, what he's going to be able to bring in round 1. But I gave him a C+ because, well, this just doesn't fit their team, right? They don't need Egbuka. That's an unnecessary luxury when you had a lot of needs, especially at linebacker. You had Jahad Campbell sitting there. You could have addressed a little more on the defensive side, getting a top-tier corner like a Jahdae Barron or like a Will Johnson. Instead, you wait till the second tier of corners to get Benjamin Morrison and eventually Jacob Parrish, both guys that are a little bit lower on my board. This is a Bucs plan that I see the vision. I do see the vision, but it just feels a little bit out of order. They've got too many good receivers to put so many resources into the receiver when you could have just done a little bit more on the defense side of the ball to make your team more complete. I would have liked to see that. But the bottom team, the team that received the worst grade overall for me, were the Houston Texans. And this is simply because the Houston Texans did not address the offensive line nearly enough. Instead, they said, you know what we need the most? A wide receiver. They went out and they got Jadon Higgins out of Iowa State. They went and got Jalen Noel out of Iowa State. Both of these guys are solid in their own right for round 2 and round 3, but they needed an offensive lineman. They moved off of Laramie Tunsil. They dismantled that entire awful offensive line. The only offensive lineman that they went for was in round 2 with Ariante Irsay, who I think is a fine pick, and I think he's going to be good, but he's not enough to fix this team on its own. This is a team that's biggest issue was the offensive line. CJ Stroud was getting murdered back there in the pocket. Instead, they say, you know what? we don't have enough receivers, which is true. Tank Dell being injured, Stephon Diggs moved off to the Patriots this offseason. You still have Nico Collins. You still have running backs that can tote the rock for you. But if you don't have an offensive line, it's not going to matter. And because of that, this is a Texans team that I think just had the worst draft overall. They're sitting over there with a C, which again is a passing grade, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that anybody had a failed draft. I thought, honestly, there wasn't a super outlandishly bad draft in the whole bunch. But if I had to pick a couple that really stuck out to me as not the greatest, the Texans were the worst of the bunch there. They get a C, not the end of the world, but still, I would have liked to see them address that offensive line a lot more. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who do you think had the worst draft overall? Who do you think was in that bottom tier that would have deserved a C or even lower? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to the world of the 49ers. The 49ers have been busy right now. They extended George Kittle, talks about potentially extending now Brock Purdy. We'll talk about how the draft affects it, how much money he might get, and what we might expect for the 49ers as we head into yet another tumultuous offseason for them. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, April 29th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the draft grades for all 32 NFL teams. We went through the draft classes. The lowest grade I gave out was a C. Obviously, we gave out a couple A pluses as well. Maybe my grading scale was a little too high, but that's for you guys to decide. In this segment, we continue our NFL talk, taking our attention to the San Francisco 49ers. They had an interesting draft. It wasn't my favorite, wasn't the worst one, but they've now extended George Kittle. 4 years, $76 million, making him one of the highest paid tight ends in NFL history. Up next is Brock Purdy. He's been a part of many discussions. How much is he going to get paid? Could he get $70 million? Right now, the number seems to be sitting around $50. We'll talk about whether or not he deserves that in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, April 29th. But like I was saying, we're going to get into a little bit of what's going on with the San Francisco 49ers. Of course, we're going to start off with that Kittle extension. George Kittle, one of the best tight ends in NFL history right now, gets a 4-year, $76 million deal. He's someone that absolutely deserves that. You talk about being the glue for this team. He's not necessarily the most important when it comes to pass catching, not necessarily the most important when it comes to run blocking, but he is absolutely huge in both of those, right? You have some guys that can step up when he's not there. But when he isn't there, this is a much different San Francisco 49ers team. They've kind of built their team surrounding his idea of a player, right? He's a guy that can come in and pancake you, but also play action like nobody's business, right? He's got some of the best hands as a tight end that we've seen in a very long time. This is absolutely worth the extension. But the big news here is with the quarterback. The 49ers have been one of the most interesting quarterback situations, one of the most interesting, really, situations for any team in a very long time. Obviously, they move off of Colin Kaepernick long time ago, right? They then Alex Smith to Colin Kaepernick, that works. Colin Kaepernick to Jimmy Garoppolo, that works. Go to another Super Bowl, and then Jimmy Garoppolo straight into Brock Purdy, right? But the thing with Brock Purdy is being paid the minimum that you possibly can. Mr. Irrelevant pick for the 49ers. We all know this. But now it's time to pay the piper, right? And there's been a lot of discussions around Brock Purdy because he's a very polarizing figure when it comes to, is he deserving of getting paid? We have seen a lot of examples of guys in his caliber getting paid, like a Trevor Lawrence, like a Tua Tagovailoa, like Jared Goff, that are sitting in these $50 to $55 million range. Maybe you can throw even Jordan Love in that kind of area. Your decision if you think that Brock Purdy is better than any of those guys. I think it's pretty close with all four of them wherever you put them in your personal rankings. But still, that's the kind of number, 50 to 55 million. Tua making 53 million seems to be the number that Brock Purdy and his team want to beat. That is not something that's going to be a guarantee at all, of course, because that is a whole lot of money. The 49ers have been able to build this Avengers-level team because they have so little investment in the quarterback position. Now you're talking about dedicating 50, 60, $70 million to a quarterback when you seemingly, with this 49ers team and Kyle Shanahan, have been able to find a new quarterback like that when you need to, especially with the guys that you have. We've started to see signs of this. They let go of Deebo Samuel. They moved off of Dre Greenlaw and Talisa Funga at the defense, some of their big guys on defense that were keeping them afloat and keeping them near the top of the league, even when they were having mediocre offensive days or mediocre quarterback play or whatever on the offensive side of the ball. Brock Purdy is a guy that I think is worth paying. It's hard to just snap your fingers and get that next quarterback, right? That is nothing that I'm sure that's something that if you go ask a Cleveland Browns fan or a Giants fan or a Commanders fan that has already found their guy now, or a Jets fan, it's hard to find a quarterback, right? The 49ers and the Packers have been very good at identifying quarterback talent. They've been very lucky, you might want to say, at finding the right guys and having the right timeline, really, of getting the right guys at the right time. Not all teams have that kind of luxury. The Rams, we got Matthew Stafford. You would like to see them get a new quarterback, but you have to pay a guy when you have a guy. Brock Purdy is a fringe top 10 quarterback. I think for me in my rankings, I don't have it up in front of me, but I'd put him at around that 13 best quarterback in the NFL. He's not a guy that's necessarily going to raise your ceiling super high, but if you get the pieces around him, he's a guy that, can handle pressure a little bit, can make all the throws across the middle, which is perfect for that Kyle Shanahan offense. He is exactly what you need to do. He's exactly what you need as a 49ers fan. And people saying they'll let him go, he's not worth it. You don't want to see the other side of this. You don't want to be the team that says, oh, the grass is always greener. You don't want to be the team that says, we don't need you. We can have our next guy up. We went out and got a quarterback in this draft, right? We, the 49ers, went out and drafted Curtis Rourke. He's going to go and be our franchise savior. We can make any quarterback, any seventh-round quarterback be the next one. That is not the truth, right? Brock Purdy is a top 15 quarterback. He's a top 13 quarterback, maybe even 12th best quarterback in this league right now. That's why it's working. It's not because the 49ers have some special sauce, some special magic, and sure, it helps. But Brock Purdy is worth paying that money. The way that the salary cap is increasing, giving your guy $50 million right now might sound like a lot, but it's going to be more expensive if you wait. Pay your guys now before they walk off forever is the lesson that you need to learn from this. Brock Purdy should be up next. I'm looking in the range of Tua to Goff, so we're looking probably at $55 million, maybe $56 million if I had to guess. I doubt he's going to be challenging that Dak Prescott numbers, but there have been rumors out there. Potentially they want more. Getting back down to earth, I'm taking Brock Purdy at about $55 million a year. Massive contract for him. He deserves it. He's basically done nothing but win his entire career. Very successful quarterback. Brock Purdy is the next one up in San Fran. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who do you think? What do you think happens in San Fran? Do you think he gets paid that $50 million? Do you think they let him walk, ride with Curtis Rourke? Anybody else on their roster? What do you think happens with the 49ers? I'd love to hear that. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to the playoffs. The NBA playoffs going on right now. We'll talk about that as well as the NHL playoffs coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over everything you might need to know about the NFL. The NFL draft grades, A's, B's, C's, everything else you want to hear. Talking a little bit about the San Francisco 49ers and their situation with George Kittle being extended, now turning their attention to Brock Purdy. In this segment, we take a look at the playoffs. NBA, NHL playoffs currently going on. We'll take a look what's going on right now as an overtime game is about to finish up in Milwaukee. We'll talk about that. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, April 29th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into everything you might need to know about the NBA playoffs. We'll start off with the action from last night before we get into the playoff game coming down to the wire right now between the Bucks and the Pacers. The Heat will start off with that, get eliminated in embarrassing fashion, losing by 55 points to the number one seed Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs move on in a series where they've missed Darius Garland. They have the highest point differential in the history of the NBA playoffs. That is a massive, massive win for them. They now get to wait for their opponent, either going to be the winner. Is it going to be the winner of the Pacers and the Bucks? Most likely the Pacers series could end in 17 seconds. We will find out there. But The Heat cold the big question surrounding this series is not how far the Cavs are going to go or how good the Cavs are, because the Cavs have been playing amazing all season long, and if you don't believe that, even after this domination of a series against, yes, a not great Heat team, still, this is a really good Cavs squad. But let's turn to the Heat. They've been eliminated. Their season really took a nosedive, 12-21 after moving off of Jimmy Butler. They needed him. They needed a closer. Right now, they don't have anything special. We saw Tyler Hero try to be the number one. He scored 4 points in Game 4 in there. They said they weren't going to get swept. They got swept. It's been a drama-filled season for this Heat culture down in Miami. That is something that maybe gets blown up. We'll talk a little bit about it tomorrow, but Giannis potentially on the trade block. He's a guy that I wouldn't be shocked if he asked for a trade. Are the Heat an opportunity to turn this team around and say, Giannis, this is yours? We'll give the Bucks Bam. We'll give him Tyler Hero, whichever one of the two that they want. Keep the other one to build. It's just an interesting situation because this, I think, is a kind of decision point for the Heat. Are they going to continue to go down the path of the Bulls, for instance, and are they going to go down the path of the Bulls, for instance, and just be this mid team forever? As I say this, the Pacers buzzer beater from Tyrese Halliburton eliminates the Bucks, so even more poignant right now as the Pacers move on now to face off against the Cleveland Cavaliers. But this feels like an end for Giannis in Milwaukee. I know it does, especially with the exclamation mark or the question mark, I guess, that is Dame's injury. Damian Lillard, of course, tears his Achilles in Game 4 of this series in the first quarter. The Bucks just are not the same without him, right? They had a shot at the end of this game. That felt like Dame time. He's not on the court. Of course, Giannis plays amazing, but still, this is not the way that they expected this season to go, of course, right? They've now lost 3 straight times in round 1, the Bucks have, and we're looking at the potential for Giannis to just move out of there. Giannis, again, there's a couple other places he could go. I think the Heat are a leading spot, but there's a couple more. When you're having this discussion, you have to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder have the assets to go out and get Giannis Antetokounmpo here, but right now, they're the number 1 seed in the West. They've been that 2 years in a row with a team of Shea, Chet, J-Dub, and all their guys. This is a team that is firing on all cylinders right now. And like we were talking about with the 49ers, the grass isn't always greener for the Thunder. It depends how far they go in this series, or in this playoffs, I should say. But the Thunder, while they might have all these things, they'd have to break up this team that has all this chemistry, these guys that love playing together. And that's something that might be worth it for a guy like Giannis, but it feels like more of a secondary option for the Thunder than anything else. The Nets also just don't make sense. There's been a lot of buzz around where Giannis might go to the Nets. They might have the assets to do it, but it's going to be very similar to the Bucks. They won't have a great defense. They won't really have a true co-star. You can use a co-star. And right now, Giannis, as good as he is, he's shown that he needs help even in the Eastern Conference, or he needs at least some guys that can play defense. This just isn't it right now. The Pacers just eliminated them in 5 games. For the 3rd straight season, they've lost in round 1 again. So the Nets, not really the spot for them. There's 2 spots that I do really like for Giannis. We'll start off with the Magic. I think this is a Magic team that is ready to explode. If they were healthy this season, I think they would be a top 3 seed in the East. They're obviously playing close against a Celtics squad that's basically fully healthy. I know we're dealing with a little bit of an injured Jason Tatum right now, but this is not a fully healthy Magic team. They're missing Suggs. They're missing one of the Wagner brothers. This is a Magic team that plays really good defense. If they can shoot the ball a little bit better, maybe they could make that work, but I love getting a primary scorer for them. But the one that I like the most, very similar situation to the Magic. They're a 2 seed right now. They're healthy, but they don't have an offensive engine. That's the Houston Rockets. The Houston Rockets need an offensive engine, and that's what we're seeing in the series against the Warriors. They've fallen down 3-1, not because they're defense, but because they can't make those shots. They don't have a guy that they can turn to. Van Vliet got hot in the end of Game 4, but Curry, Butler, Podziemski, they got hotter, and because of that, they lost that game. That defense was playing great. Şengün is playing really good. Getting a guy like Giannis that can help on both ends would be huge for the Rockets. I think that's where the best landing spot is, and I think that's ultimately where he does end up. Of course, he could still end up playing for the Bucks, but that feels more like a long shot next year than anything else. I would expect a potential trade request from Giannis after this season ends. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about Giannis? Is he coming back, especially after a heartbreaking series loss like this? Where do you think he ends up next season? I'd love to hear what you think. And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We'll be back tomorrow going over everything from around the world of sports. We'll talk about that Indiana buzzer beater in overtime. We'll talk about the beatdown the Devils are putting on the Hurricanes. We'll talk about everything else, 4 games on the NFL, on the NBA and NHL slate. That's coming up tomorrow. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn it.